Welcome back to Serious Talk, the Military Minute. I'm your host, Greg Banks. Most veteran organizations pick one lane, pour everything into it. The Robert Irvine Foundation runs a whole network of them at once, connected on purpose. Today is the flyover of that work, the first in a series where we will come back and give each program its own episode. My guest today is Robert Yarnall, who gave 25 years to the Marine Corps, retired as a Master Gunnery Sergeant, and now serves as the Chief of Programs and Outreach for the Foundation. We map out Reuniting the Brave, Fueling the Force, VetFit, and Face the Fight, and how they fit together, who they reach, and why nutrition, fitness, and mental health are treated as one problem instead of three. Think of this as the trailhead. The deep dives are coming. All right, let's get into it. Welcome to Serious Talk, the Military Minute. Today on the show, this is an exciting time for me, getting to meet with Robert Yarnall. Robert is with Robert Irvine Foundation. If you don't know Robert Irvine, I was a fan before I found out who Robert Yarnall was. He does Restaurant Impossible, or did, and I love the show. I love how he comes about things. I love how he's direct with people, and now I know a little bit about why. He's just got some pretty strong traits here. But Robert, thank you so much for making time for us today.
It's my pleasure. Appreciate you having us on.
All right, little intro on this gentleman before me today, and I won't be able to do justice to the things you've done, I'm sure, but 25 years in the United States Marine Corps, that alone is a volume of things we could dig into. Retired as a Master Gunnery Sergeant, if I understood that right. You are now the Chief of Programs and Outreach for Robert Yarnall, and you'll find out why we're saying that in a minute. They've got a lot of irons in the fire, real exciting things for our veteran community. Oversee all of that. When you got out of the Marine Corps, you did some time teaching civics at Monroe Career and Technical Institute, co-founded the Mission Makers, did some work with your wife. Like every Marine I talk to, they never have one thing going on. It's always 10 or 12 things. But nonetheless, you put on a uniform and went to mission, and you've been on mission ever since, even after taking the uniform off. So we'll get into some of those irons. But before we peel that back, before we get into that, I want to know why you went in. I want to know what some things you learned during that time of service that shape who you are today and how that carries you.
Yeah, growing up, grew up with divorced parents, didn't have much contact with my father for quite a few years. The one person who probably had a lot of impact on me was my cousin, who did 2 tours in Vietnam as a Marine. Ironically, I wound up working for him in the Marine Corps much later, middle of my term on recruiting duty. We kept getting bounced back and forth between the 4th Marine Corps Recruiting District and the 1st Marine Corps Recruiting District because the population, and he was at 1st Marine Corps Recruiting District. So when I got transferred over there, I actually wound up working for him for a little bit of time as a colonel. But he was kind of that one steady influence that I always looked up to. And coming out of high school, I was in National Honor Society, but I also was a career and tech student working, did carpentry, did some of that work, decided that wasn't really the route that I wanted to go. I thought about possibly going into accounting, love dealing with money. So I applied for a junior ROTC scholarship. I took my SATs, applied, didn't wind up getting that. I did run into the individual who won that 20 years later when I was stationed at Quantico. He was my cubicle mate as a lieutenant colonel. He went to Villanova, I went to Paris Island, but all worked out pretty well in the end for both of us. But I knew it was going to be something that was going to challenge me. I didn't really have to work all that hard in high school. And if I was going to do something, I wanted to do something that was going to challenge me and make me a better person. And I don't think there's any better place to do that in the Marine Corps. It's definitely going to challenge you. It's going to test your mental, your physical, and everything about that. Provides you with that self-discipline and the leadership opportunities that you get at such a young age that you just don't get anywhere else. So that was my real reason behind it, was give me a platform. I went into it. I said I was never going to go to college. I was going to make this my career and go from there. Obviously, never is a long time. I did wind up going back to school, obviously, to become a teacher. I also said I would never run a marathon, and that wound up doing that too. So I would say, don't ever say never, because never is too long a time. And you just never know where life is going to take you on that journey.
Absolutely. Yeah, never's that's a risky word for sure. When you went in, I always kind of like to understand people's MOS selection, and I know that different branches have different words for it. But one thing I've come to find, several people that I've met said they knew before they went in what they wanted to do when they got out. So they were very strategic about the MOS that they picked, saying, hey, there is training as a part of this. It's not just about guns and bombs. There's some real life post-service type skills that get thrown at you. What did you pick? And was any of that aligned to accounting? Any other, like, I don't see Marine count it very often, but what did you pick?
Let's be honest, I had no clue what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I liked money, so accounting sounded good, right? But I wound up going into logistics because that was the closest thing that my recruiter could find to money. And it actually fit very well. I did logistics and embarkations, so, handled large accounts for supplies, and I wound up with the helicopter squadron. So, did aircraft load plans, both Air Force aircraft, Marine Corps aircraft, ship loading, all of that on the logistical side and the embarkation side too. So it was a great, actually wound up being a very good fit for me. I found that it worked well with my talents and my skills, but I really had no clue. And the other thing that I loved about the Marine Corps is, yes, you have your primary MOS that you're doing, your primary job that you do, but you still also get to do all of the other Marine Corps things. When you go out to the field, when you're doing training, you're training in infantry type tactics, because there is no such thing as in the rear with the gear today. You could be an admin clerk and back clearing houses in Fallujah. So you still need to have those skill sets and know how to do that. So I think it's important. It's a major factor, especially today, that we train everybody with those skills, because you never know when you're going to be in that situation.
Well, that's different people that I've talked to about service. One thing I find is I don't care what branch you went into. I don't care what rank you excelled to. Don't care what MOS you picked. You're going to learn how to deal with crap and chaos at a rapid rate and how to respond, not react. That seems to be universal. So I work with quite a bit of veterans, and I say all the time, like when you're in a room and there's hard things going on, there's no question in my mind who wore a uniform and who didn't, because they just look different. So that preparation translates to just about anything in the world you want to do in life, because very few things are easy. Very few things go as planned. So you guys' ability to just, here's the mission. That's 10% of what you need. Everything else you need is a contingency, and just be prepared for whatever comes.
Absolutely.
Good deal. 25 years. That's a long time. Talk about the last little bit when you chose to get out. Was it, almost everybody says you just kind of know when it's time, and there could be a variety of factors, but what was the reason for your off ramp?
Yeah. So I had a very unique career. Obviously, I did my first 12 years was on active duty. I have been a meritorious gunnery sergeant in 10 years in the Marine Corps. I was in the zone for master sergeant, but I was in a marriage where that wasn't necessarily going to work. Started having additional children. So I wound up leaving active duty in the Marine Corps 12 years, transferred into reserves, went back to school at night, got my teaching degree. I stayed home with the boys during the day. I had 3 younger ones at the time and 1 older son. So stay-at-home dad during the day, went back to school, got my teaching degree at night, started a 𝘁𝗵𝗽𝘁𝗄𝘅 program in the local community, had an active role in the reserve unit, went from recruiting duty into communications. And it was the recruiting duty and working with the high school students that kind of propelled me into that next career, which was going into teaching and coaching. So I got recalled onto active duty a couple of times throughout that reserve time frame. My last one was at the Marine Corps History Division. I thought I was going to go to be a field historian, and they said, "Oh, we're going to have you write a book on the Battle of Fallujah." I said, "Okay, but I've never written more than a 64-page paper in college. So, all right, I'll tackle that." And that was a great experience, a phenomenal experience there. I also did what was known as critical incident stress management counseling. The Marine Corps put a program together in 2004, 2005 timeframe to deal with people coming back from combat and struggling. So I was part of a response team if there was an issue or a situation. Hey, we need you in Texarkana tomorrow morning. Okay, get on a flight and go. I also served as a readiness assessment person as a senior enlisted assessor for Marine Corps Force Reserve, where I travel around the country and did readiness assessments on reserve units. Obviously, most of those kids, when they were joining and going into the reserves, it wasn't a matter of if you were going to deploy. It was a matter of when and how many times you were going to deploy at that time frame. So I did that as kind of a secondary duty for quite a few years, along with having worked at the History Division. It just got to the point, my oldest son was in the Marine Corps at that point for 2 years, almost 3 years, and a master gunnery sergeant, reached the pinnacle. And at what point do you say it's time for the younger people to get an opportunity? So when I retire, that opens up 8 promotion slots for people that are trying to get to that next level. Passed the torch to my son. I was teaching, I was coaching, I was serving for 8 years on a zoning hearing board. I then served 8 years on the school board. There were so many other things going on, and it was time. Yeah, like you said, it's time to pass it on. I still was very involved with 𝘁𝗵𝗽𝘁𝗄𝘅 program that I started. I did a lot of work with 𝘁𝗵𝗽𝗄𝘅 Fund, which is now 𝘁𝗵𝗽 America's Fund, as a community athlete doing peer-to-peer fundraising and things like that. So it was time to move on to that next chapter of life, see where that takes you.
Awesome. What's the name of the book you wrote?
Well, I did the draft, and then keep in mind when you're writing something like that, you typically don't do that for 25 years because so much is still classified. Plus, all the major players were still on active duty, both in the Marine Corps and the Army at the general level. So it had to go through a lot of different, I don't want to say chops, but eyes wanted to take a look at it.
Sure.
Well, I wrote the draft, and one of my peer editors was a warrant officer that served in Fallujah. So he wound up taking it across the finish line, but it was for the Marine Corps History Division. So just the Battle of Fallujah.
Okay.
But it was a great opportunity to learn something that I didn't think was ever something I would think about doing. So after I sent my first chapter in, because you get your content editors, you get your copy editors. The content was all about, I did 6 months worth of research, listened to interviews, conducted interviews, tons of research from nightly situation reports and everything else, because it's very difficult in today's day and age. Back in the day, you would have all those teletypes. Now all those teletypes and message traffic goes across from general to general email.
Right.
It's a little bit more difficult to get some of that information. You got to have 3 sources that are saying the same things to put it in there, because it's official history.
Sure.
But when you've done all that research and you're writing, you've got that writer's knowledge. So there's gaps, and that's why you have your content editors to make sure there's no gaps. I sent my first chapter into the copy editors, and I was like, man, does somebody need a tourniquet back there? It looks like somebody had a massive bleed all over that chapter.
They didn't teach me this at boot camp, did they?
No, they didn't teach me that in college either. I learned a whole lot about writing in that process that I still carry with me today, which I'm very thankful for. And my copy editor, she wound up going on as a brigadier general and for 4th MLG in the Marine Corps Reserve. She was a major at the time and just a phenomenal individual that I learned a ton from at that point. But yeah, so that was a great piece of time in the Marine Corps that I learned a lot from. Wouldn't have traded it.
I got to think that was a blessing. I know every branch, you have your mission, you go out, you do it, you come back, you debrief, right? It's always important to do lessons learned, what went right, what went wrong. How do we learn to improve and work through those things? But very, very few people get to sit down and really articulate, looking back, what those things look like. And a lot of those were your memories. A lot of those might be conversations with others, but it probably allowed you somewhat of a therapeutic moment to kind of take a more cohesive view of your part in the greater struggle and all those things that a lot of people don't get that. So that's cool to hear, man. I'm glad to hear you did that. And I'm sure it's a great read.
It's, it was great. Charlie Williams, who runs our Reuniting the Brave program, was with 1-5 in the first battle of Fallujah in April. And you couldn't write about Fallujah without talking about both the first battle and the second battle. But I had all the sit reps, even from when he got his Bronze Star. And he got to see some stuff that he had never seen. And I shared it with him, the stuff that I had, but it gotten close with a lot of those guys from 1st Battalion, 5th Marines that were over there during that time. And I've done a lot of work with their association, and they've participated in quite a few different programs with the Irvine Foundation. So it's kind of neat to tie that together 15 years after the fact of doing the book.
Absolutely.
And 20 years after the fact from the incident.
Yeah, it's times like this I have to remind myself we're on a podcast, not having a sit down, because I just want to go into those stories. But I definitely want to talk about the programs, and you kind of cracked that chapter open a little bit. So let's do an overview of the different programs that exist at Robert Irvine and talk about what's the purpose behind those and where are they, just in terms of some of these are newer, some are more mature, some of them are in the news as we speak. So just love to hear a little bit about all of them.
Yeah, so just a little history of the foundation to start with. So Robert started the foundation back in 2014. He's a British Royal Navy veteran, been a citizen of the U.S. for over 25 years, loves the military, first responders. Family has always had a passion for giving back to, our hero community and those who wear he always says those who wear the cloth of the nation. He started mainly as a pass-through. So he would raise money doing different events and then dole that money out to different organizations that were doing the work. But he really wanted to hone in and focus in this around 2021, 2022 timeframe on the mental and physical well-being of our troops and our veteran community. So he started that with the first program was our Reuniting the Brave program, where we bring units back together. People, is it a reunion? Yes and no. It's a little bit more in depth than that. We work with the units, have three members that commit to it, and they work with Charlie Williams, who is our program director for that particular program, to teach them how to do this so that not just a one-time thing that they can continue to get back together, but it doesn't just bring in any service members, bringing in people that serve together, but it also brings in their family members. What a lot of people don't think about is new family members. How many people get out of the military, get divorced and get remarried like I did, or get out of the military and get married because they were single when they got out. So bringing those new family members in is very important when you talk about mental health and even just some of the physical health components of things for those family members to know what is available to their loved one. Because let's be honest, veterans were stubborn a lot of times and we don't go get that help that we may need or ask for that help that we may need, where a spouse and family members will pay closer attention and they're more willing to reach out. But it also gives them a connection with somebody else who has a spouse that served, and they get to meet the people that they heard stories about. The kids get to connect again. Some of them, I've seen this at some of these Reuniting the Brave events where the kids were young together and they reconnected as teenagers now or young adults like they never were separated.
Yeah.
It's a big piece for the families. And then the other piece that's a major factor, and that is we bring our Gold Star families and our families of the fallen. Because when I say families of the fallen, it's those that we've lost to suicide. They're not always categorized as Gold Star families. So bringing them in and seeing the connection that they have, and they're seeing this from firsthand, but also a lot of the testimonials that we get back where some of the service members were nervous about meeting the Gold Star parents, but the parents were so excited, kept their son or daughter's memory alive. It gives them some connection to the people that were with them last. It creates a whole separate bond that is amazing. And that has been such a life-saving tool in its own to reconnect those families and those individuals. We've had just one quick story. We had a group together, very prestigious group, and one of their members came with the intention of saying goodbye to his fellow team members, had a plan in place. When he got there, realized that he was not the only one struggling with those particular things. He's now got a weekly group chat that get together once a year, and he's still with us. But he had a plan prior to coming.
Thank God.
That's the power of that. And even when I talked to I always ask them, so we had one who had a larger battalion size, and then we did a smaller platoon size with a specialized group. I said, well, a couple of you didn't go to the larger one. Why? And I was like, so what were you afraid of? Yeah, I said, I used an example, like some people are nervous because, hey, I was the PT stud and now I'm, a little overweight. And that happens
Sure.
when you get into your 40s and 50s, you're not
Yeah.
22 anymore.
Murphy.
And it opened up a floodgate of, well,
Sure.
I was pretty much a bastard to some of these people. I thought they'd hate me. And after this conversations went around, people were like, that was just stupid because we're just so happy to be back together, knowing that everybody's okay. And I said, well, who's not here that should be here? And they started around awesome people. So they actually got on a call. Some of them they FaceTime, some they just got on a speakerphone call and reached out to those folks that weren't there to reconnect, because those that are in isolation need that connected piece. So It's great to be able to take those programs and expand on that and bring these people together, but also bring those extended families in is such a major piece.
Yeah. Well, it's hope, man. It can be a variety of things. I mean, there's something civilians face, like you lose a child or lose a parent or any of those things, like a cancer, right? I don't want to talk to a doctor. I want to talk to somebody that's been through what I've been through and is on the other side. I want somebody to remind me there's hope. So a couple of questions about it. Is this like to a specific location? If they want to get together, do you have a place that you bring everybody to, or they pick a location?
It varies from place to place. We have one place that we use for smaller size units. It's self-contained. It's another nonprofit that we utilize their space. But a lot of times it's like we just had 1-5 that was the Marines that served during Ramadi in 2005. So they had their 20th year get together. We did that in DC because then we had the Gold Star families laid the wreath at the Tomb of the Unknown. We took the groups down to the Marine Corps Museum because they just opened a Ramadi exhibit there. So it was a great opportunity for them to get there and for their families to kind of see, because they said the exhibit is phenomenal in Marine Corps Museum. I was fortunate I was there when they opened it, and was tied kind of to the history division in some ways because the combat artist fell underneath of us. So got a great behind the scenes tour and understand how they put the stuff together. I think a little biased, but I also think it's the best military museum, probably one of the best museums that we have in the country as far as interaction and replica of what those conflicts were like.
I got to DC in March, first time I've been there since Reagan was in office. And I was there for specific events, but I flew in, like I took a 6 a.m. flight out of Atlanta to get there as early as I could, to squeeze in as many things as I could. And I don't know how, I think I walked like 13 miles that first day. And I remembered going as an elementary school kid. I remember going to Arlington. I remember seeing JFK's tomb. I remember urban part of DC in the city and whatnot, but the appreciation just wasn't there. So, it's a town of statues and tributes, right? There's a lot to take in, and there's so many things I just couldn't get to in one day, but I definitely want to go back. I regret greatly not having gone for the 4th celebration. I think all the history, the town being cleaned up, so many things to honor. I know it's not specifically a military town, but there's so many things militarily that went on there. I think there's just a great opportunity to have seen some things that you wouldn't otherwise see. I love the idea of this program. Who doesn't have this, right? Nostalgia is a cool thing. It's a medicine that you can't get at a pharmacy, whether it's 80s music when you turn it on, or the smell of a football locker room takes you back to the Friday Night Lights. Whatever those things are, they take you to a place when life was simpler, right? So I can totally get it. And I can see where the family is like, one, put a face with a name. Like, that person can't be real. Then you mean like, nope, that's him. But a really incredible idea that I know a lot of these battles are one person at a time, one veteran at a time, but I could see where you bring 20, 40, 60, 80, 200 of these people together. And it's a healing thing for however many people show up. It's got to be healing for all of them.
We've had as many as 800 together.
Wow. And they're all over the country.
That one we did at Camp Pendleton. So it depends on the units. I'll save that when you talk with Charlie. Go into that all the details of that.
Okay.
Because he's the one who runs that. But that's what kind of started the programming, and now we really fine tuned it to where now we're focused on the nutritional, physical, and mental well-being. And those three things are so intertwined and interconnected. We have, obviously, Robert being a chef. Everything we do revolves around food. We always have food at our events, and it's not just about serving hamburgers and hot dogs. It's what can we do to, one, serve something nutritional and it's going to fuel the body, but also teach people that you can eat healthier. It's going to be better for you. I think back to eating healthy as a kid, were those peas that got put on your plate that you kept trying to shove underneath the plate until your mouth.
Where's the dog?
I wished I had a dog as a kid, but you can make healthy food that's flavorful and more organic and locally sourced versus all the pre-processed crap. Robert right now has been working with the Army, and part of it is through the foundation because we support our two corporate chefs that go out and do a lot of the work with the military chefs and helping with the bases. And Robert's been working with DOD and specifically the Army to revamp the chow halls, the DFACs on base. We've had 4 of them that have opened now: Fort Hood, Fort Bragg, Carson. I think Drum is getting ready to open. But it's changing the way we feed our soldiers, hopefully eventually everybody in the military. I was surprised that a lot of the bases, even Air Force bases that I've been to recently, don't have a dining facility. So those single service members, you might get like a little burner on your cooktop and a microwave. Well, what does that lead to? That leads to DoorDash, KFC, pre-processed food that you can throw in a microwave versus, hey, how do you fuel your body properly to not only accomplish your mission? People talk about the obesity issues that we have in our military today. Well, how can you be food insecure and obesity issues? Well, when you're food insecure, what are you eating? You're eating the crap.
Cheapest stuff I can get, which is garbage. Yeah.
Right. So trying to revamp and educate both our active duty, not just our troops, their families. We've done a couple pilot programs now with military kids in the military family unit, teaching them, because as you teach them to do it, they eat food that they've never tried before. It's phenomenal. We just ran a couple of pilots with that. We've done some pilots with single service members. Robert's worked with our military medical community at Walter Reed, had 600, lack of better terminology, food as medicine versus prescription medications, working with our medical community and helping educate them on how they can use food. So that's a really big push going forward, 2026, 2027. We run a bunch of smaller pilots this year, testing out the concepts and looking to really launch that into a nutritional education piece. Not sure exactly what that initiative's name is going to be yet, but moving forward with that going into 2026, 27, that really ties together physical wellness, nutritional wellness, and then obviously that is all tied to your mental wellness as well.
That was something I heard in DC. Like, we were there for tech stuff, but people were kind of giving a state of today's military, have AI's impact on it, all kinds of things, kind of just 100,000-foot snapshot. But one of the things they talked about was the quality of life. A soldier whose marriage is on the rocks, a soldier whose physical health is on the rocks, whose kids are struggling, who they're in a place and they can't get, they got medical needs, whatever, and they just can't get them because of where bases are and what they have access to and what they can afford. In terms of what the nation invests, and I don't want to call soldiers investments, but there's a lot invested in them. For them to be, when they say happy Marines, a healthy Marine is a productive Marine, right? Those that couldn't be more true. So a soldier that you've invested in that's effective and commands respect of their troops and all those things that you want them to be. If the home's not good, either A, they're not going to perform as well, or B, they're not going to stay in, which means you can't benefit from the expertise that you've invested in this person. So yeah, some of it's about longevity, about troops staying in longer, but certainly if you can keep them healthier and make those accommodations better, right, you're just making for a much more healthy and effective military all the way around.
And it comes into play, what can we do in terms of some financial education? We're working with a couple of partners on that piece right now as well. And food is a part of that. If you're door dashing or eating out all the time, what does that do to your budget? So educating them, again, it all ties together. And when you look at that and you look at the suicide issues that we've had, both in our military, but specifically in our veteran community, I mean, it's fairly high in our military community as a whole, from your active duty, your guard, reserve, and your military spouses. And you look in the veteran side, it was, to put it in perspective, people talk 22 a day and all that stuff. That to me is one, nobody really knows. But we do know that it's around 6,000 documented a year. But to put it into perspective, we lost approximately 7,000 at combat in the 20 years in 2 wars. In that same time period, we've lost 140,000 plus to suicide. How do we impact that component? And that's one of the initiatives that I lead at the foundation. We're part of the 𝗁𝗵𝗽𝗁𝘁𝗄𝘆𝗀, which is formed by USAA, Reach Resilience, and Humana Foundation. There's 300 different organization partners in that coalition today, and working really hard. And it's one of the things that is so encouraging to me is that you see collaboration. It's not competition, it's collaboration. How do we attack this issue? And it's not just being reactive. It's how do we move it up and put it into the forefront of making it okay to discuss.
Right. Right.
I always say that Brene Brown had a podcast where she talks about having the brave space. And it was coming from her working with some special force units where she was going in and obviously they're like, what are you going to tell us type of thing when she got there. And she just asked a simple question. When in your life have you ever been vulnerable that required courage to move forward? You've been a first responder, you've been a military member, you've been in that situation. I think about the simplest thing, going across the bridge into Paris Island. You're vulnerable. You're scared shitless. Yeah. And it requires courage to stay. But whether you're a fireman going into a burning building, or you're a first responder, police officer going into a live shooter situation, or you're a military member today going into a combat zone, just being in a combat zone, you're vulnerable. I don't care if you're on a ship with drones, with IEDs, you're vulnerable anywhere you are in a combat zone today. And it requires that courage to move forward. But how do you move forward? You move forward with that person on your left and your right. You've got somebody there that you can count on, and they know they can count on you to get home to your loved ones. Well, when we talk about mental health, we need that same person on our left and our right that we trust, that's not going to be judgmental, that is going to help give us the courage to open up and talk about our struggles. It's not, and I always say, it's not the person who's already struggling that's outwardly getting help. Not that I don't worry about them, but it's those who suffer in silence. And not all the time, but most of the times when we do presentations with our Face to Fight initiative, Mike Schlitz and I going together. Mike, double amputee, who was burned over 85% of his bodies, had 100 surgeries. When we walk into a room, Mike was injured. You look at me, you wouldn't know anything. I don't, but I could have had a TBI, and you would never know that because it's not an outwardly type of injury. Well, that same type of thing with mental health. There are some people that are struggling and it's outward. The most is suffer in silence. And it's a challenge to provide that space to get people to open up. And that is something that we have now integrated into all of our programming, is what we call bad day planning. It's actually crisis response planning, which is a evidence-based intervention prevention technique. When you say crisis, veterans say, I'm not in a crisis, I don't need that. Or plenty of people would say, I don't need that. That's true. You might not be in a crisis today, but anybody can have a bad day. And it only takes a few minutes to spiral where a couple things compile on each other. Next thing you know, you spiral into crisis. So what tools do you have in your toolbox to keep you from getting there? And that is the key element, because about 40 to 50%, it happens in less than an hour. So it's from hitting that crisis to an attempt. How can we educate people? How can we give them the tools and just really that atmosphere where they can open up and talk about reuniting the Brave, where you connect. Man, I've listened to guys and people open up, family members open up about their struggles. We worked with the Navajo like March, and we had been told don't expect too much from a lot of these guys were going to be Vietnam veterans that we had there. They opened up and told their story of struggle coming back from Vietnam, and it went around the room. We were there for about an hour and a half. And not only did the veterans talk about their struggle, their spouses talked about their struggles dealing with somebody who came back who was an abusive spouse, dealing with PTSD and nightmares. And it was one of the most impactful events that I've been part of, to see them open up. You're talking 50, 60 years later at this point. where they finally opened up and talked about something that they had been harboring. So if we can provide that, and society as a whole making it okay that, hey, it's not just the military struggles with suicide, it's a societal issue. So how do we make it okay that it's okay to say, I'm not okay? Part of it is asking those questions. How are you doing? You know, we talked about it before we started, that World War II vet asking his daughter. I had the opportunity to meet a World War II D-Day veteran, 105 years old, in a Nashville airport back in April. There's video out there of him at 104 playing the national anthem for an Islanders game. The guy's
Wow.
phenomenal. Our partners at American Airlines said when he was over with the 80th anniversary of D-Day, and he took his sax and he played it with every band over there at every event they went to. His daughter was with him at the airport, and she said he didn't start telling his story until he was 100 years old. At 105, man, I hope I'm that spry at 75. But
No kidding.
he talked about coming off
Yeah.
the landing craft and hitting the beaches, and the only thing that saved him was he was in a truck carrying the Piper Cub that he later flew over the Battle of the Bulge.
Yeah.
But just, think about how long people hold some of that stuff in. We talk about childhood trauma, we talk about moral injury, which are two major factors in suicide that, again, many people don't talk about because of judgment, shame, and guilt that goes along with all of those things. So big part of everything we do, we use food because food opens up conversation, especially after you've had tough conversations, to put people around a table and a meal. It provides connection and that opportunity. So love the impact that type
Sure.
of programming has.
And the mind's a tricky place. There's so many programs. Creative Vets is one of the ones I recently heard about, where they say you've got a Vietnam vet who's really, really struggling with PTSD. Again, they've never spoken about it. And they'll bring him in, and then they'll bring another vet of the similar era, and they'll just sit down and have a conversation. And most of the time, what you want is somebody who's been through what you've been through and can relate. I don't have to give the background. I have to describe the context. You were there. You know what it smells like. And they sit down and tell the story, and then they turn it into a country song. I'm like, they actually came in at the thing we were at in DC and just asked us a bunch of stuff, and they wrote a song in a matter of minutes. I'm like, what the frick? Yeah.
They're awesome. They do some amazing work.
But whether it's written or spoken, if it's just inside you, at some point, you're going to have a really hard time differentiating what really happened, and then all the things around how you've protected yourself to survive, what's real and what's not. And there's something about letting it out, that now this thing that was undefined chaos in my head is an articulated spoken thing. And now it's out here where I've heard people talk about journaling this way. Take all these things that are undefined. Now I got it on paper, and say everything you got to say and get it out. Now it's something I can look at. I can define it. I can burn it, mail it, whatever you need to do with it. But now it's defined, and now I can share it. And now I'm not alone anymore. To your point, isolation is the devil, and we can't let our veterans continue to face these things alone. So I'm glad to hear about all your programs. I'm glad to hear how much is going into the mental health and physical health. But one thing that I'm seeing across the VSO space is I've never seen competition amongst them, but what I'm seeing now is proactive collaboration. That if you come to me and I do A, B, C, and you need D, if I can't do it, let me find somebody who can and hand you to them, not tell you to go find somebody who does whatever that is. And we need to be, I'm not going to say it's not about money, because money's always a thing, but it's more about being efficient and optimizing the resources. There's 40,000 BSOs out there. So somewhere there's help, but how do we do it?
I think you're seeing a lot more. I know Travis Mannion Foundation just took on board. I know they just absorbed another nonprofit. You're seeing a lot more. Last year with 2025, we brought 𝘁𝗫𝗄𝘆𝘀 on board. It's a food truck training program. Yeah. Military spouses, veterans, through culinary training, business planning, all of the logistical pieces, and then they can operate out of one of our food trucks for up to 3 years. Not everybody that's in the program goes into a food truck. Some of them just want the business training, and they're operating a brick and mortar, or they have a food product that they want to do, or they work with some of our larger events as an event chef. Everybody's got their own little niche with that. But it made sense with the fact that we do food. That's a big component of it. And part of their training evolution that they go through and chance for them to work on their business aspect is they do what we call breaking bread with heroes. Whenever Robert goes on to base, I should say 95% of the time that Robert's on a base, we'll do a breaking bread with heroes, and it could be for 300, it could be for 1,600. But we also do those in veteran communities. When we do our face to fight, our crisis response, bad day planning, we use food, and whenever we can, we partner with our food trucks as well. We were just in Kansas City working with Veterans Community Project, VCP. They have 8 or 9 tiny home locations around the country. I always say, you're looking to do a tiny home village, look to VCP, partner with them because they've got the model right. They've got wraparound services. We come in and we do a lunch with their veterans. We can do the suicide intervention prevention work with them. Location in Kansas City, our food truck is chef, who's a very talented chef. They asked if he would be willing to come in and teach some cooking classes. Absolutely. That's part of that nutritional piece of how do you make something that's healthy, more flavorful, and utilizing a lot of the things that these veterans or even for young military families get at a food pantry. I use the one in DC. They got 5 pallet boxes of sweet potatoes. So one of our team members, she's a retired Air Force enlisted aide. So she works with that food pantry on putting recipes together with those items that they get at the food pantry.
Yeah.
For people, what am I going to do with a sweet potato? Well, you got sweet potato puree, you got sweet potato biscuit. There's multiple things.
They're French fries now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You can cube them up and roast. I have a little Ninja. Roast them in the Ninja or air fry them. There's so many different things that you can do, and it's one of the healthiest things you have. But if you don't know what to do with that, so it's a challenge, especially for young families. If you didn't learn how to cook at home, you don't get that in most high schools today. So we utilize our food trucks. Those chefs are amazing chefs as well, but they'll do Breaking Bread with Heroes at veteran transitional shelters, tiny home villages, but they also have worked with veteran military families and done cooking demos and classes, not just demos, but working with the kids to create a meal from scratch. And the beautiful thing of that is you see the confidence in that child going from learning some nice skills, learning about different foods, and then eating foods that they've never eaten before because they made it, and sitting down with the family for a family meal without any phones, without any iPods, no digital distractions, and wanting to do it again. That's again, how do you bring that family unit together for connection?
Yeah. The family dinner is an answer to a lot of problems.
And it's hard.
And a lot of people have no point of reference for that, for sure.
It's hard with the busy schedules we all keep with running kids to this and that, the family Uber service. And they've done that.
Indeed. So we talked about reuniting the brave. We talked about the food side, and that's called Fueling the Force. Yeah. That's the name of the.
No, that's the, that is our 𝘁𝗪𝗃𝗄𝘆𝘀 is our food truck.
Okay.
The nutritional education piece doesn't have a name per se yet.
Okay. That's the one you hadn't named yet. Okay. All right. The next one on the list you had is Michael's, is VetFit. Let's talk about that.
So we ran a pilot with EOS Gym down in the Tampa area, taking 10 veterans that one's paralyzed. We had an amputee, some that had just gotten out of shape. So looking at it from the whole person perspective of, again, that nutritional, the physical, the mental wellness, giving them some nutritional guidance, looking at some of the blood pressure, weight, not just the weight, but body fat, looking at all the different wellness components of that, teaching them the nutrition. They worked with a personal trainer. So we had 10 veterans that went through, and that first pilot lasted 6 months and had a huge success. One of our participants, Thomas, he actually got in good enough shape that he did the Yomp with us over in Scotland. And he talked about it from the perspective of not only do I feel so much better about myself, but what you did is you gave my kids their father back and my wife her husband back.
Sure.
Because I am a totally different person today because of just getting my body back, which put my head back in the right space.
Right.
And there's something to be said for that. When you feel better about yourself, you are using exercise, it puts the mind in a good space.
Chemistry is a real thing. The body was made to work a certain way. And when you don't feed it right, and your body's not right, your mind's not right, your mind's not right, your body, everything suffers, and it becomes a snowball effect. Yeah, I can certainly understand that. And I love the fact that Michael's heading that up.
Michael's an incredible.
Yeah. I can't wait to talk to him.
His story is incredible. He's got an incredible sense of humor. Obviously, being double amputated, we were just out in Kansas City doing a large thing with the veteran courts out there, and we were the last to go on of a 3-hour seminar. And he comes out and like, I know y'all been sitting here for a while, so put your hand up if you need some time. He said, while you're at it, just do the little spirit fingers thing. And then he made some crack about the fact, you all can do that.
Yeah.
But I've learned to give it back to him. I was like, Mike, if you want to really do it, we can just rock, paper, scissors for it.
Yeah.
And I just always rock because he's got the scissor hooks. So,
scissors always wins, right? Man,
he's just a great great individual that you talk about resiliency and the right mindset of he lives his life every day for the folks that didn't
Yeah.
come back in his
Yeah.
squad that he lost that day where he was injured. Persevered over 100 different surgeries and continually still has surgeries. And it's a testament to how resilient an individual can be. And he continues to serve and give back to our community in ways that amaze me. I'm very, very proud and honored to partner with him in so much of
I
the
can
work that he gets
imagine.
to do.
I cannot wait to sit down with him. You said something a few moments ago, and as I'm hearing you talk about Michael, this is coming to mind. We talked about heroes, and it's the strangest thing. I've never met a veteran who holds that title, who embraces that title. Now they will talk about heroes, and it's the people who did the same things they did, but they're not. It's a really, really strange phenomenon. But one of the things I was reading this past week was talking about a veteran who, kind of like the one you mentioned, who's making a plan, ready to end it. Like, I can't do this anymore, and had survivor guilt from people in their unit, and said, you know what? If that person meant so much to me, is what I'm doing honoring him? And it just like a switch flipped for them and said, then I'm going to live for them. I'm going to be healthy. I'm going to quit drinking. I'm going to do right by my family. And it talked about so many things that, to your point, in an hour, it can go from good to horrible. But at the same time, when you find that hope, when you find that new purpose, new mission is what I keep hearing people call it, my post-service mission. When they find that, good luck slowing that thing down. Just wind them up, point them in the right direction, get them motivated, and they're off. So, man, it's so exciting to hear about. The first time I read about Michael was after you and I talked, and you told me about a Yomp. I had to Google how to spell that. I had no idea what it was. But then the first video that popped up was Michael at the Yomp. So most of the people hearing this probably don't know what a Yomp is either. Let's talk about that.
So it's the 𝗁𝗏𝗄𝗃 Yomp. It's run by the Army Benevolent Fund. There's 1,200 Allied Force veterans that participate in this and supporters. You do either 20, they say 22, but it's closer to 24, 36 or 54 miles in the Scottish Highlands in 24 hours. I wouldn't say it's the most treacherous, but it is certainly some of the most challenging hiking you could do anywhere. You're in Scotland. So first off, you get off 4 seasons in a day. And, start out, it's a little chilly. Then the sun comes out, it gets warm. Then it rains. Then you get up to the top of the mountain and it's hailing on you and it's cold. You're literally on sheep paths for a lot of it. It's just an incredible experience because you're challenging yourself both physically and mentally. And I say we do 4 days. We took 100 veterans over this year and we do it in 4 days. So you're building a bond as if you were in boot camp for 13 weeks in that 4-day period. And you're hiking. Some people you might hike the whole distance with, others you're going to pick up along the way. You have different conversations as you go back and forth, not just with our own participants, but with, you got Ukrainians there, you got Canadians, you got Australians, Germans. It's our Allied Force partners. And you realize these folks don't have a lot of the support that we have in the U.S. But you share a lot of those same stories, those same situations, and that before you finish, it's bronze, silver, gold. Before you finish bronze, you have, and the last checkpoint is at 19 miles, little rest stop. And at that point, you're in the Highlands and you look out, and I had Brett Slabinski's Medal of Honor recipient. His wife and son were doing it. So I was partnered up with them and actually had my wife on the trip this year. And he was asking, well, where's that mountain at? And I pointed over to the left. He's like, we got to go up that? I said, no, we just got to go up that one, which it made it a little bit better because it's 2,500 feet, but it's straight up. There's no switchback. You're going up a sheep path, and in the process, you're crossing over some streams, and it's muddy and it's raining and the wind's blowing, and you get up to the top and you can see the 24-mile finish tent, but it's like still another 2 miles and it's downhill that same straight down.
Which if it's raining and you're tired, that ain't any more fun either.
It is probably worse than the uphill. But again, it's pushing yourself beyond that comfort zone. And that's, when you talk about what it does to open up people and their struggles, it's pushing you past that boundary that you need, that you maybe haven't had in a long time. And it's having some of those conversations along the trail that I told you earlier that we had a good friend of mine, 30 years plus in the Marine Corps, and opened up about stuff that came out from her childhood. And she got up to the top of that mountain and she just had double knee replacement, but she was needing it before she did the hike last year. And I wasn't sure she was going to finish. But she pushed through, she got up to the top and kind of she let it all go. I'm here with my tribe, done some hard stuff in my life. Why am I carrying this baggage? Opened up about stuff in her life. And her sister has since opened up because of her willingness to do that. And she did it in a video, passing that on. And she's talked now about it at our golf tournament this year. She's talked about it with other veterans groups. When you have a retired master gunnery sergeant opens up about struggles, it's powerful. We had another individual this year that he shared a story with a few of us that he's been holding on to for 20 plus years as special operations, a soldier that had a very prestigious career, but carried some baggage that he finally opened up on. And that was, he pushed through to the 56-mile point. Just an incredible story. And just to see that impact that it has. And we took 12 female veterans last year for the first time. They still communicate almost daily through a text group, which again, it's creating that bond and that support structure and support element that goes beyond just that one day or that 4-day experience. You build a friend for life. When you share those same struggles, similar to boot camp, when you share those same struggles or similar to being in combat, you have that common thread, that common bond, and that common experience that just builds connection that it's hard to do in everyday life, especially when you're scattered to the four winds across the country.
Sure. Yeah. There's a lot of universal benefits to that. First off, you do anything, anywhere, at any point in your life that's extreme physical exertion. On the back end of that, your body just wants to let go of crap, right? That might be baggage from war. It might be abuse as a kid. It might just be, I'm freaking tired of carrying this by myself, right? Just, somebody who's carrying all the weight of the family, financial, whatever, right? There's something about unloading that. And you don't realize the physical weight of mental baggage. Man, I can totally get that, but I can also understand the people who don't necessarily know each other doing something hard. The one thing we're bonding over is we're dying on the side of this mountain. So let's share some stuff. And yeah, just anybody who does hard things with other people, you're going to have a bond, even if you don't like, because it's common, right?
It's the best book I ever read on Vietnam. I actually used it in teaching. It was called The Things They Carry. And it talked about you carry your pack, all the stuff that's in your pack and your rifle and everything else. But then it also talked about the things like the picture of your girlfriend, the rabbit's foot, a cross, whatever it was spiritually, or that kept you going that way. But it also talked about that mental piece that you were carrying. I had to teach health education students, 34 females, 2.5 hours twice a week to get their social studies credit in high school, 15, 16-year-old girls. I used that and was able to correlate it to this, just like you said, the mental stuff that you're carrying and the physical things that they carry to school every day, but also the mental things that they carry to school. And I think it's true in anybody's mental health. We carry things both physically and mentally that impact us on a daily basis. And the more we are able to unpack that, unpack the ruck, as they say, it's so much better for us to at least to take that weight out and lessen the load.
And I don't think science will ever untangle the physiological effects of some of that stuff. Like, you just don't know the damage your physical body is taking because of mental anguish. It's, I think we've probably mastered at this point taking average people and making them feel like they're invincible, because that's what you need a soldier to be. What we've not yet mastered is how to teach invincible people it's okay to be vulnerable again. And I think that's where we're sitting, right? This is a really hard thing to undo, because at this point, by the time you're willing to undo it, you've probably been carrying that longer than you were pre-service time. And it's, man, it breaks my heart. It's a lot of what motivates me to do what I do in this podcast. I'm glad you told me the name of that tiny home thing, because I saw a story about this 10 plus years ago. And I believe they did one in Savannah, Georgia. And it was a tiny village. It was houses. It was veterans came in, amputees, all this stuff. They had canine training, service dogs. They had that group came in. They had skills training. They had counseling. They had physical therapists. And it just became, all of a sudden, it was like being back on base. Like, everybody had their little house. So there was some independence, but there was also community. And man, you just can't. A friend of mine's running a homeless shelter in Amarillo, Texas, called Transformation Park. And one of the things they require them to do is, if you come in here and you stay on property and it's free, you're required to do 20 hours of community service. You've got to go out and start interacting with people again. You can't just live in your head. Nobody wins that war. You got to go do stuff with people. And they've had an incredible success rate of people who've been on the streets for 20 years come in within 6, 7, 8 months, find a job, go find an apartment, and they're on the way out, because that community is all the difference in the world.
Finding a purpose again.
It is. Absolutely.
It's important.
Face the Fight, you talked a little bit about, and I know we'll do an episode dedicated to this one. This is the one, honestly, I've been wanting to look at hard. We live in Atlanta. We go down to the coast at least once a year. We tend to go down between Christmas and New Year's to Jekyll Island. And there's a company called Nine Line. A lot of military people have heard about them, but they're a veteran-owned shop who makes a lot of apparel and whatnot. They have cool t-shirts. And what gets me is they also have Black Rifle coffee inside of there. So every time I stop there, it's $300 for 2 shirts and 4 pounds of coffee. But the very first time I went in there, the very first shirt I saw was the 22 a day. And I know that number's low because they can't attest where people went and got in a car wreck, and they don't call it suicide, or they don't call it a veteran's, whatever. One's too freaking many. Can we just agree on that?
Absolutely.
So tell me a little bit about Face the Fight, the organization, where it came from, kind of who started it, and to what extent y'all have involvement with it.
Yeah. So it was USA, Reach Resilience, and Reuniting Foundation that put it together. It was a concept that we can't rely on the government to do everything. And the thought was linking up the peer network through our BSOs with some of our clinical components. So Justin Schmidt, who has since retired from USAA, this was something that he had an idea for and kept pushing and pushing and pushing until it became a reality. We joined. It started in 2023. I think we became a member of the coalition at the end of 2023, and then have since been a grantee. We were kind of one of their pilots for integrating peer-led crisis response planning and lethal means safety training into all of our programming. It just lent itself to that. So there's tons of partners that in that coalition that do different components of whether it's connecting, it's financial, it's physical fitness, like Team RWB. We've worked with them and trying to work on a larger partnership with them. How can we tie in some of their fitness components, especially as we're meeting with young military members on military installations? We know that the struggle for our military is in those transition years. 18 months, I've seen some stuff that says it could be as long as 5 years in that transition period. And it doesn't matter whether you were 4 years, 8 years, or 30 years in the military. There's a disconnect between the DoD, the VA, and then to the veteran nonprofits out there, because there's something for everybody. It's just a matter of how do we connect them with those resources. But if we could, in the bare minimum, introduce our military folks to a Team Red, White, and Blue or a Semper Fi and America's Fund community athlete program that they can get involved, whether it's still on active duty, when they transition out and go back to their hometown, there's a good chance there's going to be a chapter of one of those somewhere nearby. It could be Irreverent Warriors. There's lots of different organizations that have different chapters like that. So how do we get this information that we can connect them while they're in, so that when they transition, they at least have that one connective tissue when they get out of the military? The TAPS classes that are done on military installation, nobody pays attention in those.
I was going to say that seems to be universally stated that that's the biggest waste of time. It's a box you're checking, right?
If you did that in the communities or even regionally, how much more would people pay attention? Plus, you could at that point bring in those local resources where they're going to pay attention, because now they're back home where they were going to go. And they're more likely to pay attention to it because they're in an area where they're going to be and they can connect. There's lots of different things that could be done. But the Face the Fight Coalition is really, I feel, honed in and built those connective tissues between the different military organizations, but also the civilian clinicians. So I've been on numerous webinars with civilian clinicians, and being the peer in the group, they sometimes struggle and are, well, how do I talk to a veteran? And I'm like, well, you talk to them like you talk to anybody, just be authentic. But we took the crisis response plan, and typically a crisis response plan clinically was used by clinicians with somebody who has recently attempted or is at high risk for suicide, has had suicidal ideations, or has recently attempted it. It's like, well, if this is a self-management tool, shouldn't we provide this to everybody? That's why we deemed it a bad day plan, because it's a self-management tool. It's designed to keep you out of a crisis. So if you can do that, great. If we have somebody that we come across that we know is in a crisis when we're doing our training, we then have some partner organizations that do that next level of care, whether it's a home base to stop stolen suicide. There's organizations that we know in our coalition, trusted partners that we can refer somebody to depending on where they're at in the country. And that's the really neat thing about it, is there's been a lot of different work and sharing of information that, hey, it might not be that we have a direct collaboration, but I always say it's another tool in the tool belt. Hey, somebody had a person whose husband was a dust-off crewman, still has shrapnel, lost the rest of his crew either in combat or had since lost to suicide. And he wasn't willing, he's never even gone and gotten a disability rating to get the care from VA. But one thing he would do is golf. Well, a group called Next 18 that does 4-day golf camps, and they're affiliated with the PGA. So they have these camps around the country. If we can get him to go to a golf camp where he loves to golf, that's the one thing he does. He still goes and golfs with his buddies. Great. Again, and what tool do we have in the tool belt that works for that individual, or just like taps for our Gold Star families?
Right.
They're coming into a Reuniting the Brave program. If they're not affiliated, we can get them affiliated with TAPS so that they have those resources. And that's the beauty of a collaborative coalition like that, is we can help resource the people that are unaware of it and maybe need a different level of care of some sort. So I would say we know what we do well, but we are not everything for everybody. And you can't be. And when you try to be, that's the problem. You
beginning of the end of you there, because you're not going to be good at anything if you're trying to be everything. Absolutely. Robert, thank you for your time today. Thank you for your service. I can't begin to understand the things that you probably sit and do day to day. I'd love to hear, like, what's the day in the life of Robert look like? I'm sure that's a busy, busy day. I don't think I've ever been more excited hearing not just that these programs exist, but that you're coming at the whole thing, because the human inside of this is what we just tend to lose. Like, there's so many, and they talk about this with VA all the time. These are humans. How many people have died in the parking lot of the VA waiting? There's a person there. Freaking A. What have they given, and what are we doing for them? Like my stance is, if we're not willing to do everything it takes to be on the back end to support our veterans, we should never recruit another one. And we need to do right by these men and women who've just given a blank check to the nation. But for the holistic approach you guys are taking and growing with intention, and not just out trying to do something, but do very effective things. I feel like a lot of the things you hear about, maybe it's just because of what the media does, but I just feel like they're throwing Band-Aids at a bullet wound a lot of times, where I feel like you guys are actually the tourniquet coming in saying, we can't wait till there's symptoms to deal with. We got to come back to the problem and get at the mental health, get at the financial training, get at the physical exercise, get at all these things that keep them out of crisis. There's another side of this that I've been working on, and I've got a few episodes coming up. I'm trying to get with corporations that have very mature veteran hiring programs. It is a fact that hiring veterans is smart business. It's a fact. And you talk to any company that does it, and they'll tell you this same, like, this isn't a secret, just not everybody out there knows about it. So we want to go out and tell that story of more of them. But if we can somehow shorten that window between them getting out and getting that foot in, like I hear something like it's like 85% of veterans, the first job they find coming out, they quit within the first year, because it doesn't meet that purpose. It doesn't meet those values, those things that they're wanting to cling to. So the things you're talking about is, let's come back before they get on the exit ramp. Let's talk about this, give them an idea, something to aim at. And even if that doesn't work out, that's not a no, it's not a dead end. It's a stepping block to get to that place you want to get to, so you can find.
Well, I think a lot of people, and this is a misperception, and I think some of our veteran communities at fault with this too, is that every veteran is broken. No, we're not broken. When somebody goes to get a VA disability rating, it's not just about today, it's about tomorrow. And I'll use my stepfather, or my father-in-law, as an example of this. A Vietnam veteran that wound up with rare form of leukemia, wound up with dementia, needed special care. If it weren't for that, we wouldn't have been able to get him the special care down the road. And it was $10,000 a month. There's only so much that you can do, but you have things that are caused if you're exposed to burn pits and things like that. Doesn't mean you're broken, but it means you should be taken care of medically.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean you don't have a skill set that's usable and leadership qualities and all that. The adage that we're broken is, I think Mike is one perfect example of it. Did he have medical needs? Absolutely. Is he broken? No, he is 100% somebody that can do amazing things. And I've seen that from so many veterans that are capable of doing amazing work. They might need even those that we work with, a lot of the folks that are involved in the criminal justice system. They had a bad day, had a bad moment. Many of them are in the criminal justice system because of something they were dealing with from military. But if you give them the opportunity, veteran treatment courts, when we're working with in California, 82% of those who go through the program never come back through it. So you might need a hand up. You don't need a hand out. For some, for others, they're ready to go right now. They just need to be given the opportunity.
Yeah.
And I think back to what responsibility I had as a young Lance Corporal at 18 years old in the Marine Corps. 40-year-olds in some companies don't have that responsibility.
Right.
So
yeah, and that's hard to translate. Like the options on how to to assess a threat and deal with it in the military, it's a different. They're useful skills, but you got to find a way to turn that into something that is constructive in the civilian world. But again, my point is, they're equipped, they are functional, they're not broken. They just have to be given direction and find purpose that they can align in it. So if we can keep them out of crisis, if we can help smooth out that transition, and that's really the best way to say it, because some of that's financial, some of it's geography, like where am I going to land when all this is done? I went in, I lived in Topeka, I went in, I got married, now her family's here, whatever. Logistics plays into that. That affects your health care, that affects the job opportunities. All those things are tied to that, but you got to work through those things. So man, I'm excited. For those listening, we're going to go do episodes on Reuniting the Brave, on Fueling the Force, on VetFit. We're going to hear some of these people that Robert talked about. All I've seen is videos, but man, I'm fired up. I can't wait to meet them and do more, but thank you for what you're doing. Please, please, please give our best to Robert Irvine. Thank you for the passion that he brings to this. If you don't know who he is, go look up the show on YouTube. The show's great, but go look up the foundation. You'll see a guy who lives, breathes, eats, sweats, and drinks giving back. And he has a way of going about it that I've not seen in anybody else. It's really, really endearing to see. So, Robert, thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you and talking to you in the future. Thank you, sir.
I appreciate it, Greg.
All the best. Thanks for joining us on Serious Talk, the Military Minute. Robert Yarnall, thank you. 25 years in uniform and a second act spent making sure the veterans who follow you never have to carry it alone. What comes through in everything you describe, from reuniting units to fixing what's on the plate in a chow hall, is that you treat every one of these people as a whole person, not a case file. That is rare, and it's the reason this foundation works. We cover a lot of ground today, and that was the point. This was the overview. In upcoming episodes, we're going to sit down with the people who run these programs one at a time, Reuniting the Brave, Fueling the Force, VetFit, and Face the Fight, and go deep on each one of them. If you want a head start, look up the Robert Irvine Foundation and see which of these speaks to where you or someone you love is right now. There's a doorway here for almost everyone. Subscribe and leave a review so the rest of this series finds you, and check the show notes for links to everything Robert mentioned. Thank you to Jason Fowler for allowing use of his song, Mystery Road. Robert, thank you for building the kind of on-ramp you wish every veteran had waiting for. This is Greg Banks signing off. I'll see you at the next briefing.